A lot of times people are waiting for other people to validate themselves because they don't know the value in themselves. And so you need to stand up on stage knowing who you are, knowing your strengths and your weaknesses, and having dealt with those, knowing how to respond to your own weaknesses.
Welcome to Give a Heck. I am your host, Dwight Heck, and for much of my life, lived my life in quiet desperation, wondering how I was going to pay the bills, take vacations, save for retirement, and one day wondering if I would get off the hamster wheel of life and have purpose. A life that most of society lives, which takes us to work, then home, then repeat, and pays us hopefully enough just to survive. The harsh truth that most live with more month than money and have no idea how to live life on purpose, not by accident. This ensures the mass majority are living not just financially broke, however emotionally and mentally as well due to financial pressures. In each episode, I will introduce you to thoughts, ideas, and guests that can help you to learn how you too can live life on purpose, not by accident.
Good day and welcome to Give a Heck. On today's show, I welcome Mike Acker. Mike is an executive communication coach, a keynote speaker, and the author of 10 books, including the best-selling Speak with No Fear and his newest release, Speak with Confidence. Mike passionately coaches business professionals to lead and speak with confidence. In his presentations, he entertains and inspires audiences using stories of growing up as a son to drug smugglers who turned missionaries. Mike retells and relates lessons learned on how to overcome insecurity and exclusion in a cross-cultural setting, and he unpacks the path from employee to manager to leader. I'd like to welcome you to the show, Mike. Thanks so much for agreeing to come on and share with us some of your life journey.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to speaking with you and giving some stories and some value to all of your listeners.
Right on. Thanks, Mike. So, Mike, one of the things I mentioned before we hit record was that I focused on a person's origin story from their earliest recollections to where they are today so that people can learn to know, like, and trust you in a very short period of time. So could you do me a favor and share from your childhood to adulthood to where you're at currently?
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember at 15 years old, I heard the story of my parents, and my mom sat me down and she gave me the background to my upbringing, my origin story, which was that my dad in college became a drug smuggler, learned how to speak Spanish, learned how to fly planes so he could go down to Mexico. And there he would cut out the middleman, bring it back, and he established himself. He went through law school during that time too, because while you're selling drugs, might as well learn about the law. And met my mom. She joined him on the adventures, and then they were thinking about having kids. And so they thought, well, we better not be doing this while we're having kids. So they got out of that and started legal drugs, coffee, and jumped in 1978. Did that for several years. I was born. My parents were still very much hippies. We were part of the Love Commune. And then my mom experienced this radical conversion experience, and she told my dad, and he's like, well, that's cool. She'd always been kind of religious, new agey, spiritual. So he just thought it was a new spiritual thing she was doing. She's like, I'm a Christian. She took all her witchcraft books. My sister still remembers my mom taking all her spell books, all her talismans, and burning it in the fireplace. Meanwhile, my dad's like, oh, that's cool. Good for you. You're on a new spiritual bent. and then 6 months after, we were in Hawaii. I was about 4 years old, still vaguely remember this. I see the pictures. We're celebrating with the Love hippie commune family. And my dad has a radical experience. He hears the audible voice of God speak to him out loud. And he's like, wow, whoever that is. So whoever this Jesus is, he didn't even really know Jesus. He's just like, whatever that is. He didn't really know anything about following Jesus, being a follower of Jesus. So it was around Christmas. They went to the store, got a happy birthday Jesus cake, went back to the Love hippie family commune and smoked pot and sang happy birthday Jesus with a whole bunch of hippies. So then my parents were like, well, okay, we better learn what this whole Christianity thing is. And we were in Hawaii, found out there was something called Youth with a Mission, which is a large organization. that basically trains up young Christian people and then sends them around globally. So my parents enrolled and had sold the coffee company, enrolled in this program, and we're all in 3 months living in Hawaii, enjoying the weather, learning about all this stuff. I was almost 5 years old, about to go into kindergarten, and my parents were like, okay, we get done with the 3-month training. We went back to Washington for a bit, gathered. I think we moved, and then we went on what's called a mission trip with that 3-month group that they had learned from. And now they went around. So we went, when I was just about to turn 5, we went to Philippines, Hong Kong, Korea, Japan, and China. And I remember this, my sister and I talked about it. We smuggled Bibles into China that summer before I turned 5 years old. So my parents were all in. And my whole family was extremely mad, right? I mean, I remember so clearly, we had these Bibles underneath this small layer of clothes, and there was on the suitcases that hit your leg as you're walking. Remember those things? You carry them, they hit your legs before the roller ones. And they put it on the X-ray, and then my sister and I are worried because we're all going to go to jail, right? And it goes through, and they don't see anything. They don't notice anything. My whole extended family was furious. My dad's like, look, I smuggled drugs for years, and now I'm doing something good. I think it's okay. So we went to China, had some crazy experiences. I got chicken pox when I was in China, ate some food there that was just crazy. You go to these markets. This is 1985. And then I went to school, and my dad took the bar exam because he had done that law school degree years ago and became a lawyer. And so really, besides this crazy kind of vague memory and the origin that my parents had, which is crazy, adventurous risk, we grew up for years in just a very normal suburban area in the United States, small little town, 2,000 people, went to a Christian school, very conservative Christian upbringing, where we did stuff like take care of the poor on the weekends, serve some AIDS victims, go to some nursing homes and visit so I saw my parents really live it. My dad comes home when I'm 10 years old. I'm loving Mexico. I'm living in the United States. I'm loving my life, love finishing up 4th grade. And he says, I quit my job and we're moving to Mexico. So a couple months later, after some serious fights and lots of tears and all kinds of stuff, we moved to Mexico, drove down there, arrived in Mexico. We were supposed to be there for 9 months, and my parents were going to do that whole YWAM, but they were going to be leaders of it. And in Mexico, we went down there. My parents found out that in Mexico, if you were out of the school system, you couldn't get back in. So imagine something happens to family, you can't do it for whatever reason, and you can't get out. You get out of school system. You're 13 years old. You're stuck. You're done. Well, there's no future for you then. You're going to have to find some kind of menial job. There's absolutely no progress plan for you. My parents had found these 3 kids that were living in a tar paper shack, all from different fathers. The mom kind of made her way around the little hovels, and my mom found them. They're lice-infested hair, all out of school system, couldn't get into the school system, maggoted fish on the ground of their little hovel. My mom put them into our van, drove them home, deloused them, and then said, we got to get you into school. And that's when my parents found this out. And so they started a mission work to get kids back into school. And it's been continued in Mazatlan even after the 13, 14 years that they were there. Meanwhile, I'm growing up there. I'm doing some stuff to help my parents, but I'm also just being a kid trying to figure out what to do. Went surfing and that kind of stuff, but I couldn't speak Spanish. And I'd overcome a speech impediment as a kid in the United States, and I had overcome that, learned how to speak with confidence. It's one of the reasons why I write about speaking so much, is because it was such a huge thing in my life. And finally had gotten to a spot of confidence, but now I was starting over again. And this is one of the things I tell people again and again. One of the reasons why I am very effective in working with people is because I've been there. I'm not a natural. I had the speech impediment. I couldn't say things. I moved to Mexico. I was insecure. And I had to learn confidence. I had to learn skills. I had to learn the ability to do what I do. So in Mexico, I struggled to learn Spanish. People laughed at me. I became a class clown because if people are laughing at you, you take their words, you take their response to you, you start internalizing. You think, well, I must be a funny person. I must be a class clown. I must be disruptive. So I leaned into it, changed how I saw myself to become what they saw me as. And then as I worked through that, finally got to a spot where I was confident in myself, understood myself, and really dove in and became actually more Mexican than I was American. And then I moved back to the United States and had to learn again. And I had some opportunities to speak, and I kept on putting my foot in my mouth, kept on making stupid mistakes, like ridiculous mistakes. Like I went to a nursing home, Dwight, and I was supposed to like give this like encouraging like little Bible lesson to, people in nursing home. They're older in life. And it was the most depressing speech that I'm sure they ever received. Basically, I told them, you're going to die. Though you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you'll fear no evil. You're all about to die, but you don't have to be worried. It's like no one's smiling, no one's laughing. I was just like, yeah, death is coming close to us. It's so depressing. I was depressed. I walked out and called the pastor who set me up with it. And I'm like, what in the world did I just do?
Oh my
And
gosh.
it was miserable. But then I embarked on a 20-year journey of public speaking and really in pastoral ministry and workshops and other things. Then in sales, wrote a book, and now I write books. I do speaking. I just got back from Des Moines yesterday as of this recording, speaking with a group there, working with a client there. So that's what I do, but it's been an interesting journey to get there.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It's quite amazing, actually. I like how you put though that your parents go through all this stuff, and your dad just decided, let's move, let's go back, let's go move again, let's quit, let's move to Mexico. Like your dad took the bar and became a lawyer, then you ended up moving to Mexico and come back and forth. You've had a education that's been worldly, that's for sure. And
yeah, we should get him on the show. He's got a book out there. He's talking about his story. I always tell people he's the most interesting person.
Yeah, it sounds like it. That's amazing though, because the reason I focus on the origin, obviously all of it is a combination. Some of the questions I was going to ask you answered with your origin, which is perfect. I love that because it flows into, like, one of the questions I was going to ask was, how has living in Mexico affected you? Well, it did affect you. You had to learn Spanish. You became like you said, a class clown, and you just continued to move forward and adapt, right? Whether or not that adapting is always the best for us or not, it's still who you are today is all because of the trials and tribulations you went through, and even the successes, because like you said, you had a normal childhood somewhat. Once your parents, you grew up in a Christian environment, a couple thousand people, small community. I grew up in a small community as well. It was a little bit bigger than that, around 10,000 people. Very, very Christian, Catholic Christian, Lutheran Christian, Protestant, Unite, everything that you could think of under the sun. But yeah, it's nice to have that grounding. Most people don't realize, if you grow up in a big, massive city, you still have your local communities within that. So they always say, oh, it must have been nice to grow up in a small place. Well, you grew up in a small place. Did you venture outside of your community, or you went to the local school, went to the local stores? You had your own community. All this big city is a bunch of communities slapped together. There's all different types of races and religions and communities that develop within inside it. So I appreciate you sharing that. I hope the listeners caught some of that. I was smiling throughout it. I like the fact that just there are so many different things that we could touch on, but we'll move forward here. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about, Mike, is that imposter syndrome is real with so many today. I personally still go through this, though it's infrequent. It still comes up, and I have to combat it. I have to reframe my thought process and shut out the outside noise that is critical to what I'm doing. Sometimes it's not just internal, it is external, obviously, as well, that causes this feeling in so many. Explain to the listeners, for those that are not aware, what is imposter syndrome? And what do you do to teach people to conquer this very real circumstance and fear that happens to so many?
Yeah, so imposter syndrome is the feeling that when you're around a group of people that you don't fit in. So the first time I heard it was several years ago. I was working with a client, and she said, I go work. She was a young female, probably 30 something. and she would go work with all these guys, and they were all these really high pedigree colleges, and they're all huge income earners. And she had made her way up, but really from nothing. And she said, it's a classic imposter syndrome. Like, imposter syndrome. And I thought about that. And then later on, I researched and read about it and heard about it some more. But for her, here's all these people. They were all guys. They were all coming from these backgrounds that she didn't come from. They had more college education. So even though she's working among them, she didn't feel like she was one of them. She didn't feel like she was on the same level. So a lot of times that this shows up is when people get a new job, and they just feel like, wow, everybody else knows their stuff. Everybody else has their act together. I don't belong. Or this could be with a whole bunch of peer group of other people doing the same thing. So think about podcasters. Maybe you go to a podcast and you're at a podcast conference, and maybe you just started your podcast and you're only 10 podcasts in, and you go, oh, these people, I don't belong among Dwight Heck and all these other people here. I mean, they've been doing this for 100+ season episodes, and man, I just don't belong. And so you feel like you're not there, not on their level, that you don't match up. Yeah, sure, you have the role, but you feel like you're an imposter. You feel like you're not really part of it. And the whole issue here is one of value. So you go into that podcast conference, just use that example, and you go, wow, they are valuable. They have over 100 episodes. I only have 15. So I'm not as valuable. Or the executive team, I'm getting ready to speak to the executive team or the management, and well, they're valuable. They're leaders. They're high up in the organization. They have this. I don't. I'm not as valuable as them. Or you're newer to an organization, and you feel like, well, I don't fit in. I'm not as valuable as everybody else. They're tenured. Or you are going to go into a new school, and people all come from a certain background in college, and they all have their doctorates, and you have your BA, and you feel like, oh shoot, I'm not as valuable as them. So really at the core of the imposter syndrome is really an issue of value. Where's my value lie? And to some degree, there is some relevance and truth in that. So going back to that podcaster conference example, if you go to a conference and every single person is a paid podcaster, every single person, that's their full-time job, every single person has over 100 episodes. You go in and you just started your podcast and you have 15 and you have 2 other jobs and you're trying to figure out what to do, and everybody else has written a book and you haven't. There is an aspect of value. And these people, they have experience. That doesn't mean that you're less valuable. It might mean that your podcast is less valuable currently. But at the end of the day, if you are doing, and I'll walk you through even a ladder of value. And by the way, this is something I've talked about a whole bunch. I ended up writing about it in my book, Speak with Confidence, where I wrote a whole chapter about it, because a lot of times people don't speak with confidence because they struggle with their imposter syndrome. So as you're wondering about your value, here's a great way to think about it, that the bottom rung is what you have. For example, my son goes to a private academy, and in the academy, he has some classmates that are extremely wealthy. One of the high schoolers, for example, they were going to a volleyball game, and apparently one of the dads, our son's not in high school, he's in elementary, but one of the dads was like, well, why don't you guys just take my private jet? Like you do, right? We don't have a private jet. And so it's very easy if I'm hanging out with a whole bunch of people on that level, and not everybody's at that level, but imagine if they all were. It's very easy to go like, wow, they have more. Look at their cars, look at their boats, look at their houses, look at their vacation homes. And it's very easy to then say, well, I don't belong. One of these is not like the other, and I feel less valuable. So there is value in money, but it shouldn't take away from your inherent value. There is value because it allows you to do some things. But it is bottom rung value. I don't want to throw it away and say there's no value in it, because there is, but it's bottom rung value. And you don't need that value, that bottom rung, to actually have high rung value. So the second rung is where you come from. And there is value in having that pedigree. There is value in having a certain upbringing and having certain, hey, I have two parents at my house. I don't. I grew up in a foster child. So there is value in that, but it doesn't mean you're less valuable, but there is value in it. But a lot of people, what they do is like, well, everybody else has this background. I don't, therefore I don't have as much value. No, those are valuable. They do bring value, but once again, they're not top rung value. Okay, the third rung of the ladder is what you have accomplished. And this one I have struggled with, because sometimes I would like to think that this rung here is higher up. And really it's where you go, this is what I've done. And look at all the amazing things. And you think about, like, for example, my dad continues to do really cool things. He's 74. You meet some other people who are retired who are doing nothing right now. They've done some really cool things. My dad still does cool things. And you compare their back to each other and you go, both of them have done cool things, interesting stories. But some people, they live in the heyday. Well, I've done this. I've accomplished this. I've done this. And once again, that has some value. Maybe you led at a high level. You're not now. You retired or you quit or you're doing something else. Maybe you wrote a book 10 years ago. Cool. Good for you. You did that. You accomplished that. Maybe at one point in time, you had a podcast that was top ranked, but you don't now. It was in the past and then you stopped. And so it's a previous one. Now, a lot of people attribute more value to that. Well, the CEO has done this. I haven't. Cool. That is, once again, valuable, but it's not the top rung value. So all of these three, they're valuable, but a lot of times what people do is they invert the ladder I'm talking about. So they flip it upside down and they go, these people have more, they come from more prestigious places, and they have done more, therefore they're more valuable. No. Those are not top rung. Those are bottom rung. Get your attention off of that and on to the next two. So the fourth rung, now we are in one of the top one, is what in the world are you doing right now? And so maybe that person did some really cool things in the past. Good for them. What are they doing now? How about you? You just took this new job and you're in a leadership position. Good for you. That's awesome. That's high rung value. Right now, you are excelling. Right now, you are succeeding. Right now, you are doing great things. Focus on what you're doing, not what they've done. What you're doing is more important than what they've done. Now, maybe they're doing some great stuff too. Great. Then you're doing great stuff together. So maybe Elon Musk is working 7 days a week and kicking tail and inventing cool things. And you are working 5 days a week, but you're kicking tail and you're loving it and you're really enjoying it and you're putting your heart and soul into it. Good for you. Maybe that person is working hard at something that gives them a huge revenue. Cool. You're working hard at something that doesn't give you a great revenue and you really enjoy what you do. Good for you. Same value. No more value in them than you. So know what you're doing. And if you're putting your heart and soul into it, you're doing it to the best of your ability. One of my favorite Bible verses is whatever you do, do your work heartily as for the Lord rather than for men. So you're putting your heart, your soul into it. Good for you. That's top rung value. And only you know if you are putting in a good amount into that rung. Okay, then let's go to the top value. It's who do you belong to? I mean, I have literally been, because I was a pastor for years, literally been on the deathbed with several people. And I'll tell you, I mean, we've seen it said, but it's very, like we've heard, like nobody at their deathbed is asking for money or telling people what they've done. And it's true. I mean, I've been there on that bed. I mean, one of my favorite stories, and I get emotional telling it, is when a guy named Dwight, and his wife was passing away. She got brought into the hospital. They revived her. She died. They revived her. She died, and they revived her. And they said, Dwayne, if she goes nerd again, I think you should just let her go. And she did. And I was right there in the room. You know what he said afterwards is he said, thank you for a wonderful 45 years. And it was just nowhere in there. I mean, and nowhere in the following days did he talk about his success and what he had and his house and his job and his pedigree. It was family. And when people came to the memorial and celebrated, it was people. And Karen died rich. And she wasn't a billionaire. She wasn't a millionaire. But Karen died rich. Her family was in that room. Her pastor was in the room. Her community was in the room. People said stuff about her. That's rich. When my mom died in a car accident many years ago, 200 people came to her memorial. That's rich. So who do you belong to? And sometimes you see people, they are so focused on these other ones, and maybe they have that inverted. They're saying, look at what I have, look at where I've come from. But that who am I, or who do I belong to? It's bottom rung to them. And really that's top rung value. So I can go into a place and go, hey, I might not have as much as everybody else. I might not have a pedigree where I went to Harvard like you did. And I may have not led at a CEO level for 10 years at a Fortune 500 company, the bottom 3. And you have. Good for you. What I'm doing right now is focusing on communication and communication training. And I have a great support network around me and a great family. So I can go in and work with some people who are super high on those bottom 3, but I don't feel any less because I know what I'm doing now, and I know how I'm doing it, and I know who I belong to. So there's no imposter. So knowing your value. And then when you present, here's 3 things that you should think about. So know your value, know the value of what you do, and then prepare to do it. So if you go in and so say, for example, you invite me to speak at a conference and I go in, I'm like, I'm valuable, I'm awesome, but I don't really know what I'm talking about and I haven't prepared. I should feel like an imposter because I can't just bank on, I'm great. That's like the whole thing. We're like, hire me, I'm great. Well, what can you do? Nothing, but I'm great. Okay, you have great self-esteem, but nothing else. But if you know, hey, I know who I am. I know that I got great valuable stuff and understanding and I'm really putting my heart and soul into it now. And I've prepared. You should walk in there like you're on top of the world.
That's great. What a great explanation right from the start, right to the finish, and your process of going to the rungs of the ladder. I love that. You are correct, though. So many people do flip the ladder, right? They live in the expectation of, I have this, I have that, and yet they have no family life. They have no connection to their faith. Like they have no core values that they live by, except for the value of presenting that they have everything. They're going on the wealthiest trips. They have the nicest cars, have the private jet or whatever. And I know a lot of people like that too, but their family life sucks. They literally are living on a hamster wheel. So when I talk to people and coach them about a hamster wheel, they don't believe it, but it's the truth. I have multi-millionaire clients that live on a hamster wheel. They literally, they don't even stop long enough to celebrate life. They have a win or they make a lot of money and they're on to the next thing. They don't even stop enough to celebrate, to take time. I'm not saying celebrate too long, but celebrate enough. And they miss family events. They miss their life's in session. This isn't a dress rehearsal is one of the things I say all the time. So I appreciate what you talk about. So those listening that are high achievers, if you don't have core values that you follow, my core values are very simple. 3 of them, 1, 2, 3, faith, family, work. Work is not number 1 on my rungs. Number 1 for me is my faith and my connection to God, who has made me have what I have so that I can appreciate, have gratitude. And, from that, it gives me a sense of peace so that I'm there and present for my family. And because I'm there and present for my family, my work, my career, my business, my clients get that. They get 100% of me when I am there because I want to be present when I'm with my faith. I want to be present with my family. And then I want to be present with my actual clients so that I'm not thinking about my family because I know I've given them value. I know I give them time. I know I give my faith that too, so that each of those things, they all work together, but each of them gets my presence, if that, makes sense.
Right.
So I keep it very simple for my core values, but I like that. I'm definitely going to listen to this again. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to skip forward to one of the questions because I wanted to talk to you about your book, your latest, obviously. What did you find was missing in the sea of books on the topic of speaking? And I've read books, I've been to conferences, I belong to
Yeah.
a mastermind on it that led you to write your book, which is called Speak with Confidence. When there's so many other books out there on the topic, what drove you to write another book on speaking?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I've actually had a lot of people say, I read your book and it stood out to me from the sea of other books. And it's really, I developed a framework, and I coach a lot of people on communication. So for example, 5 hours yesterday with the president of a company, and then the day before, 3 hours or 2.5 hours with his group. And then the day before that, just all virtual stuff. And then after today, I have 3 or 4 more clients today. So I work a lot on this, and I'm really well known in the whole area of Speak with No Fear, because that's my first book. And so a lot of people reach out to me about that. So what is it like, okay, to not just take away fear, but to speak with confidence? Where does confidence in communication come from? And it really comes from 3 sources. And this is the premise of the book, that it comes from your identity as a speaker, your identity as a speaker, your messaging, your ability to organize your thoughts, effective messaging systems, and then delivery skills. Now, delivery skills, I talk about that in my book, Speak with Confidence, but that right there are tons of books on delivery skills. Do this, stand like this, use your hands like this, don't do this, position your eyes like this. So lots of books talk about the mechanics of speaking. Do this. Then the second most popular that books talk about is how to organize your thoughts. Okay, start with an introduction, do this, do that, do this. And so a lot of books talk about really your messaging. How are you organizing your thoughts? And then like the presentation style of Steve Jobs, for example, by Carmine Gallup. Great one. It's about his organizational structure. And then Talk Like Ted, and the most popular current public speaking book by Carmine Gallup again, or TED Talks, and that's by Chris Anderson. Those are about messaging and skills, messaging and skills, messaging and skills. What you're saying and how you're saying it, what you're saying and how you're saying it. What's really different is mine talks about and starts with, who is saying it? Who are you? Because there's a way you perceive yourself. See, wherever you go, you should have the same identity presenting itself at different places. So I'm Mike Acker. Now I'm Coach Mike. Same guy, but there is a different way that I'm acting slightly. With my wife, I'm Mike Acker, and now I'm a husband. I'm Mike Acker. Now I'm with my son. I'm dad. Same guy expressing himself differently. But when it comes to speaking, a lot of people try to all of a sudden become someone different. And they have in their mind an avatar, oh, I should sound like Dwight. I should sound like Mike Acker. I should sound like my favorite podcaster, my favorite speaker, or a teacher I had, or then there's all kinds of stories on this. And so they try to become someone else. And the instant that they try to become someone else, then all of a sudden there's this added pressure, and often they feel more insecure. So instead, study who you are, know who you are, bring that onto stage with you. So really, and this is why imposter syndrome is part of that part. It's part of that identity, because you feel like an imposter. Well, that's going to be a weak identity when you stand on stage if you feel like an imposter. You have to know that you're the real deal. Then, of course, we got to do the other things like prepare and understand what you're saying. But you got to know that you're the real deal. And then you can stand on stage and not be doubting. A lot of times people are waiting for other people to validate themselves because they don't know the value in themselves. And so you need to stand up on stage knowing who you are, knowing your strengths and your weaknesses, and having dealt with those, knowing how to respond to your own weaknesses. So that's the difference that this book really does. It really goes into this, who are you as a speaker? Okay, then let's organize your thoughts. And I have some, what I believe are very unique ways of thinking about that. And then I have some skills, and I don't just do it light. I kind of go deeper into it. And from there, it's a framework for comprehensive confidence and communication.
No, that's excellent. I like how you talked about the fact that people teach, or books talk about mechanics and thoughts. Like I thought of Toastmasters, and I've thought of so many different organizations out there, even things that I've participated with. And when I started my speaking career, I was captive speaker. So I was going to finance events because I own a finance business, and I was presenting, and I really wasn't a speaker. I was a person talking about short little things about stuff that was on a PowerPoint or slides at the, years ago. Bottom line, though, the connection happened when I pivoted away from that into my speaking business to go and speak in front of people about, how they can live life on purpose and not by accident, which is my mission statement. My stories and my vulnerability are what sells, what attracts people. It's taking them through that emotional roller coaster and ending it on a proper note, not just how am I holding my hands, am I pacing this and that. As a person being in the audience, because I've been to about 300 events in the last 30 years. I've been to so many events in finance and prior in my computer consulting firm that I had, that it was the person's story. It was their energy they gave off that attracted me. I don't remember whether or not they stood in one spot. I don't remember any of that stuff. I remember their story. I remember their connection. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
Yeah.
But the delivery skills are so huge, right? It's like, are you delivering with passion? Are you connecting? Do you have tonality? Are you talking like monotone speakers? I don't forget those, because I forget what they're talked about, but I don't forget them. It's just like, oh my gosh, not this guy again.
Yeah. All three of those, if you know who you are and you've really established that, your strengths and weaknesses, and you know what to lean into, if you know how to organize your thoughts so you're not rambling, so you're not just going wherever, so that you actually have a point and something that people are going to walk away with, tell a story, etc. And you know how to do it so that people aren't distracted by a monotone voice or by
practice too.
Eyes.
You need to practice. Like the last speech that I did for a group, I practiced. I practiced right standing over there. I have a camera, and I practiced my walking. I practiced my tonality. I listened back to it just like a coach listens to his game day film, or watches it with the team, because people are giving me their time, something they never get back. And I better be at my highest level to deliver to them. In my opinion, and too many speakers don't do that. So I'm looking forward to actually getting your book, because I believe till the day I die, I'm always going to be in a learning mode. Always. I don't want to be that camped person that you talk about, that's always talking about, oh, I accomplished this, I accomplished this. If people ask me, I'll talk about what I've accomplished, but what are you doing now is what I want them to want to know or be interested in. And this is what I'm doing. I'm not camped. I'm climbing in life. I'm a lifelong learner is what I tell people.
Yeah, so absolutely.
I know we don't have a lot of time, so I got one last thing I'm going to ask you, and then we'll wrap up. Mike, if you had to give our listeners one last closing message, what would you tell them in regards to giving a heck and never giving up?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's what I'd say is, don't give a heck to what was in the past. Give a heck to where you're going. In other words, where you are is not where you have to stay. But a lot of times what we do is we look back at what's going on, like where we are, and we're like, man, I'm frustrated, I'm tired, I don't have this going on, I'm not as good as that, I'm not making as much money. And so we're spending all of our energy giving a heck to being stuck in a spot. And if you are stuck in a spot, that's not what you should be paying attention to. Instead, where you are is not where you have to stay. So just because you're stuck somewhere, just because you're at the job that you're at, just because you're at the education level you're at, or just because you're in the relationship turmoil you're at, just because you're at the weight gain that you're at, just because you're in an insecurity in your communication, just because you are feeling like an imposter, where you are is not where you have to stay. And if you don't believe that, and if you just focus on giving a heck to what you're stuck in, then you will never get out of it. The more you focus on how bad it is, the worse it will get. You'll get into that victim mentality, and you will not be able to get out. And you'll be in that rut that just keeps on going. But if you believe that where you are is not where you have to stay, then you can start getting the tools that you need to. Okay, I'm in this hole, but I don't have to be in this hole. I can get out. Okay, what are some things I can do to get out? And then maybe you fail on a couple of times. Maybe the first ladder that you build breaks. Maybe the ramp that you fill falls apart. But as you keep on trying and believing that you can get out of it, and you do that counseling, you read that book, you do that plan, then you try that plan, then you do this one, and you keep on believing, then little by little, those steps of failure actually became learning points to a ladder of success to get out. So my encouragement is, where you are is not where you have to stay.
100%. Bottom line is, it's a choice whether or not you get off the hamster wheel of life. And part of that is learning that you have to live outside. Success is always outside of our comfort zone. And you can live a life thinking that you're happy, and maybe you are, but if you have an itch or anything that within your body that tells you that you're tired of the same old, take baby steps, find good mentorship and coaching. There's great books out there, great things you can listen to, great events you can go to. It's never too late to give a heck, like you said, right? And just move forward in life. So our time is up. I want to respect our listeners and your time. However, before we end, can you please let the listeners know what is the best way to reach you?
Absolutely. Dwight, it's been fantastic to be on your show. Thank you. You can find me at mikeacker.com. You can find my books on Amazon. I was in New York City over the holidays, and I found my book at Fifth Avenue, Barnes & Noble. So you can find it at some local booksellers. If you have a local small place that you go shopping, support them. Go speak with confidence and dive in. And really, not just confidence in speaking, but confidence in life.
Right on. Fantastic. So I appreciate you coming on, brother. Thanks so much for being on Give a Heck, Mike. I appreciate your time and sharing some of your experiences so that others too can learn it is never too late to give a heck.
Thank you for taking time out of your day and listening to Give a Heck. If you find value, I'd appreciate you sharing with your friends and family so they too can learn how to live life on purpose, not by accident. So you do not miss the next episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and please also post a review. I look forward to reading your comments. This has been Dwight Heck. If you want to check out other podcast episodes or today's show notes, please check out my website, giveaheck.com. And until next time, together let us all strive to give a heck.